this story about Jesus laying down his life as an act of love for his friend. And this, of course, is also a sign pointing forward to the cross, which we'll explore more in the next video. But for now, that's the first half of the Gospel of John.
All right.
I thought I talked.
You know, I was thinking about going
He
like
said a lot, actually.
He did
but
say
you
a
go
lot.
on.
Yeah.
I was telling Terry I was thinking about going 1.25 speed on that, but it's way too fast. You can't even understand it. No, I didn't actually. He does talk fast. So it's like 8 minutes, and like for a normal person in 2022, that's about 7 minutes too long, you know? So everybody's like, where did he go? Anyway, all right, so with that, we will, the one thing I do want to say is, as we're jumping into today, Jesus washes the disciples' feet. I mean, I find it very difficult sometimes in an adult class to come with new information. I think that's a good, I think that's an okay thing to confess. My goal today is that you are astounded at the things that you find that you didn't know. We'll just sit. We'll see how I do. If at the end you didn't learn anything, that's okay. I'll give you $1 or something. But we'll see. Today we're going to definitely pay attention to the details. Hopefully open our eyes to what's really happening and the shocking things that are happening to some degree. Hopefully we'll see how we do it. All right, so we're going to start with a prayer, and then we'll get into our word. Dear Lord, we just thank you so much for bringing us all in here this morning for this time of fellowship and this time of studying your word. We ask that you continue to use it for us, to help us to apply it to our lives, and to help us to share it with others. Challenge and change us this morning. It's in your name we pray. Amen. So, chapter 13, verse 1. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. He then poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, the one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, not all of you are clean. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Okay, so getting into this here, this is a very common passage. We have heard this so many times. We've seen it in movies and depicted in so many different ways. We're going to get into that, but it is very, very well known to us. So hopefully we can as we get into some of the details, we'll look at it a little bit differently when we leave today. When and where are we? I think that's the first thing is, we already knew Jesus closed his public ministry. We're in Jerusalem. He came up the triumphal entry. That's where we are. We've been there all week. Although John hasn't really given us those different events that happened during the week, that's where we are. The night, which we're going to continue talking about for the next few weeks, The night is Thursday night. This is the day of the Passover, right before the feast. You know, one of the, we'll talk about that just a little bit. One of the things that I like to continually bring up is the days of the Jewish calendar and the time is much different than ours. Not only is their culture, not only is everything different, the way they keep up with time is much different. The day starts at sundown, and yeah, that's right. And so the day ends at sundown, starts at the beginning of the day. The next one starts then. So it is Thursday night, Passion Week. To be more specific, it's April 13th, 33 AD. That's pretty good. We know that because it's the 15th of Nisan. That is the day of the Passover. That's the day that they set aside for this, that God, instructed to them to do. In the Jewish calendar, which we've talked about a little bit, there's 354 days typically in the Hebrew calendar. They have these weird years where they have leap years and stuff like that, which I don't even get that for us. I don't know why we haven't done away with that, but anyway, they have a strange calendar to some degree with changing dates and different things. But in the Jewish calendar, the year is 3761. Now that's a very specific day, very, very specific year. 3761. Then I said 3792. We're going to go 3792. I don't know where I got the other number from. I must have typed that in there wrong. It's definitely 3792. If you're taking notes, draw a line through that. 3792. Moving on. This is 15th of Nisan, 3792. And what that means is that's 3,700 years and 92 since the creation of the world. So that's the Hebrew calendar. I think that's something to take in to some degree. This year, Saturday, April 16th, that would have been Sunday, April 17th, would have been the correct day. I don't know why I wrote down all the different things here. One neat thing, though, about the Hebrew calendar, before I close this part out, where I've completely messed up, is the year right now in the Hebrew calendar is 5782. So that's pretty neat. So if you're a young Earth, young creation type of person, it's 5782. That's how many years it has been since God spoke the world into existence. So, but we're concentrating on this night, and we're going to continually come back to this. I hope, and we're going to have a discussion on it. We won't have enough time for it today, but right there at the beginning it says, "Now, before the feast of the Passover," that's our beginning that John gives us, and throughout he's going to give us different markers to exactly what day it is and its relationship to the death and the burial and the resurrection, which are sometimes seen as conflicting with the synoptics. I think that's an okay thing to say. I hope to present it in a way to where you use this to build your faith. I think that's the right way of looking at the discussion. You're going to use these facts, and in the end, you're going to come up with your own night. Which night is it? Because I will also tell you, many people who read John only will tell you that it's Wednesday. Is that a big deal? It's a big deal, because then it would disagree with the other three Gospels. But we'll. I want you to use this as a test of faith. I had this excellent quote that I found the other day, talking about doubts and testing your faith. Having doubts isn't evidence of the absence of faith. On the contrary, doubts can be considered the very essence of faith. So, whether it's Thursday night or Wednesday night, we'll get to that. Isn't that important to me? I don't know. The whole thing where they got the sunrise at the beginning, the sun sets at the beginning of the day thing, it's already confusing to me, So, but what it ends up doing is the next day after this meal, Jesus dies. Jesus is crucified the next morning. If it's Wednesday night and he dies on Thursday morning, then he dies at the same time the Passover lambs are being killed. That's somebody who's a Johannan, only book. That's what they would go with, his timeline. Or can his timeline be looked at another way? Which we'll get to that too. I don't want to get into that too much. We don't have enough time for all that, but we're going to. So where are they? John doesn't really lay it out for us. Luke lays it out for us. I'm going to read this little passage, which I also feel like sets up the whole scene. We're trying to concentrate in John, but at the same time, a couple times today especially, I'm going to read a couple other passages from other books just because they all talk about this event. It's very important. And John, being John, leaves out many details for us. Now the Feast of Unleavened Bread drew near. This is in Luke 22, by the way, which is called the Passover. And the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to put him to death, and they feared the people, because they feared the people. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was of the number of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. And they were glad, and they agreed to give him money. So he consented and sought an opportunity to betray him in the presence of the crowd. Then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat it." They said to him, "Where will you have us prepare it?" He said to them, "Behold, when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him into the house that he enters, and tell the master of the house, the teacher says to you, 'Where is the guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' And he will show you a large upper room, furnished. Prepare it there." And they went and found it just as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover. And when the hour came, he reclined at the table, and the apostles with him. So, one little note that I'm going to throw out there, which we talked about, I don't know, it was only like 5 years ago, so whoever remembers this, good luck. But when we went through Mark, for me, I think it is understood that this is John Mark's house. The writer of Mark, this is his house. I don't think that's going out on a limb. We don't have enough time to go into that, but if you want to text me later, I'll text you about it. But we know that they are in Mount Zion. They're in the old city, the city of David. They're just outside the walls. How do we know that? Because it's a two-story house. You can tell where somebody is at this time based on the size of the house to some degree. There were no two-story houses on the west, on the north. You know, this is a specific place. We know exactly where they were. To say there was only 25 even at the time, I think that's okay. There's not many. So to say they're in an upper room of a furnished house, all these things, we know the exact area that they're in. It's on the Zion side in the city of David.
Is that still standing?
It is still standing. It is still standing, yes. Good question, Christy Dabbs. Hold on here, let's see what we can do.
All right.
Get a star. Check mark.
Of course that's not going to work. It says enter the code. There's no code. Hold on one second. Give me 2 seconds here. Small pause. Get out of this. Exit. Give me the code. Oh, of course.
Ridership on New York City subways
Somebody should have this prepared, you know?
of the pandemic, but it was still essential for the system's remaining riders.
I'm obviously trying to connect to the wrong TV or something. Last chance. And airplay. Okay. We're sending a picture to somebody else. Anyway, I had some pictures of it. If you type in cynical, CENACLE, that shows pictures of that's the Latin word for the upper room. That's the building. Today it is a beautiful building. I mean, it is like the architecture's unbelievable. Inside there's all these fancy columns. To try to describe it to you, I should have just YouTubed it. I could have showed you a video. But anyway, a little late. But
C and what?
CENACLE, cynical. That's the Latin word for upper room. But this is still a place. This is the floor in the upper room is unbelievable because it's the same floor. Now there's been wars there. People have been fighting there for 2,000 years, and the building has been torn down, fixed up, torn down, fixed up. The Byzantines fixed this wall. The Muslims fixed this wall. Like it's got crazy stuff going on inside, but the floor is the same. You know, some pieces of the wall are supposed to be original or, let's say 200 years after, those kind of things. But the building is still held as the traditional site. One thing that I like to bring up really quick, I'm way off the subject, but in archaeology, they grade the places. They'll say from an A to a C. If it's a C, who knows? It's been that same for like 1,200 years at least. It's been the traditional site for 1,200 years. This place is like the A+ place. It is definitely here because it can't. How can I see that? Old eyes. Yeah, it's tall. It looks nice. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really
It's very nice. Huh? I hadn't got to that. This is a fancy place. That is exactly right, though. This is a rich person's house. One thing I was going to say is in Acts 1, when they come back and they meet after Judas has died, and they vote for Matthias to be in the group. Verse 13 in chapter 1, and when they had entered, they went up into the upper room, and here they are, and they all meet there, and then they vote in him to take Judas' place. They're still in this same house, same place, and it continues on through Acts. But this is a rich person's home, exactly right. The family who owned this house would have been very wealthy, probably hereditarily wealthy to some degree, to have been able to get on this piece of real estate. Any of the area right there where we are on Mount Zion, in the first century Jerusalem, is top dollar real estate. That's the way I like to look at it.
Now, did they lived in the city, but most of them, their wealth was cattle and everything else, wasn't it? Or
Not these people. These people never seen a cow.
they never saw, they
Oh,
was
no.
strictly just city folks.
Yes.
Wow.
They would have been, they would have owned banks and owned people and owned, you know what I'm saying? Like they owned a lot of stuff, We're gonna get into that, but like these people probably never went out into the wild, or like where the shepherds are and those kind of people. These people are rich. They got, one of my favorite things in the Chosen TV show is when Matthew goes in, he's getting his sandals. He has like 10 pair of sandals. These people have 10 pair of sandals. They got the Jordan 1s, they got the Kobe's, they got all of them. But they everything. Another thing I'd like to say is, and when it comes to real estate, as far as the history of the world, I mean, maybe Athens, maybe Rome, those type of things. But like this section right here of Jerusalem is where we live. We estimate, real estate prices by how many acres it is. These acres over here in Bartow County are worth different than over in Hope County, But when you talk about Manhattan, though, you talk about by the square foot because it's so valuable. That's exactly the same thing here on Mount Zion for 2,000 years, or 3,000 even, This is not, you're not coming in and buying this if you're, now maybe Elon Musk, but like nobody normal is going to come in and buy some land, and it's been in the same family for 2,000 years. It is not, you don't come across this for free. So that's the side of the Last Supper. Not the Lord's Supper. One common misquoted, misconception thing is that's where they had the Lord's Supper. The Lord's Supper is actually the Eucharist, which we talked about. I had mine, took all my markers on, but anyway, the Eucharist is the scene where he says, this is my bread, this is the bread. This is a symbol of my body. Take and eat. This is this cup of Welch's grape juice. Take this. This is a symbol of my blood. Take it, drink it. It's alcohol free. Do this in remembrance of me. And that's the Eucharist. That's the Lord's Supper. The continuing of that institution. This is the Last Supper. This is the scene in which that happens. But this is a separate thing. So when we talk about this event, and we're going to be in the Last Supper for the next, I don't know how long, but it's all the way through like chapter 17. So we're going to be here for a little while like this. But the last food Jesus eats, this is the last supper he has with his disciples. The last time he sees many of them is right here. This is the Last Supper. Lord's Supper, different thing, institution, sacraments. Anyway, so we're this whole section right here for all the way up until 17 and 18, we're going to be in this one scene. This is John, he devotes all this time. In our layout, in our outline, we saw how we have all these different scenes that are broken down chapter by chapter by chapter. But the second half of the book is much different. The second half, the book of glory, the book of passion as it's also called, is a much different thing. His hour's come. Everything slows down, and we concentrate on His words and His fellowship with His disciples. John 13:2 through 17:26 is also called the heart of Christ. I like that. That's good. If there's one thing that I will say as we come into this Last Supper and everything's closing in on Him to some degree, it's not. This is His plan. This has been His plan the whole time. Nothing happens to Him by accident. The Jews don't stop His plans. This is part of His plan. So, this is His hour. His hour has come. Father, it says, having loved His own who were in the world, He loved them to the end. He loved these chosen men to their uttermost. And then immediately, John contrasts that with Judas. And he shows us Judas. And during the supper, when the devil had already put in the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. And we're going to continue talking about this, but diabolos is the Greek word there. The devil is already put it into his heart. The Bible makes it clear. I think it's very hard to misinterpret this. It's going to say it again here in a minute, if we make it to that, about how Satan enters into Judas Iscariot. I feel like sometimes we kind of skip around that maybe. Even my own self, I do. I try to have him involved as little as possible. But here, Satan is working. He is in the heart of Judas Iscariot. And one truth that we can take out of that is that Satan can enter your heart. Last week we talked about some of the most difficult parts of the Bible to understand, some of the hardest understandings of divine judicial hardening and those kind of things. We learned that if you won't accept and you harden your heart and you turn from God, and then you can't accept and you harden your heart, then God comes and He hardens it also. A very difficult thing, making it so that you're incapable of believing. And then this week, we see that Satan, the devil, can enter your heart. And we see that by now, Satan had an open door into the heart of Judas. And it's not by accident. It's not, he's innocent. It is the path that he has taken himself down, leading him to that. Choice after choice after choice. Just throw that out there for the, I think Judas is innocent type of person. So, but in verse 4, Jesus rises from supper. This is a shocking scene. We're going to get into that, but this is a dramatic, unexpected thing that happens. He is the host of this Passover. It would be very out of the ordinary for the host to stand up, to do anything to some degree. Besides, do the toasts and to start the meal type of thing. But there's so much that we learn about this exact scene outside of the Bible. And we're going to get into Da Vinci in a second, but there's so many things that we learn about it, reading other things, Roman culture, Roman and Jewish culture at that time, that help us to understand what's going on here. But it's very out of the ordinary, and then he takes off his outer garments. He takes off his robe or cloak or whatever you'd like to call it. It's an outside clothing for, to be dismissed to some degree without, you're not naked after that. He still has his tunic on. Having his tunic on, Luke says he is dressed as one who serves. In Luke 22, but I am among you as one who serves, meaning he's there to work now. And he goes and he takes this towel, a linen cloth is a more exact word there. He wraps it all the way around himself. He girds himself up. And for me, this is more like a beach towel. This thing is long. It goes all the way around him, and he still has some. After he washes their feet, he dries them with a towel. We talked about how John uses the word wiped there. It's the exact same way that Mary wiped his feet dry. He wipes it dry with her hair. He wipes their feet dry with this towel. With the end of the towel. Last chapter we had, I think I might have said this last week, but I really like this. We had a meal with friends that started with a foot washing. And now in chapter 13, we have a meal with friends that starts with a foot washing. But he comes first to Simon Peter. And that's important in our understanding of the whole scene. He's the chief disciple. That's why he comes to him first in a way. We'll also figure out some other ways, but he's not having any of it. Simon Peter kind of always has his own thing going on. one thing that I will say that we disconnect with is the whole foot washing in general. In the first century, foot washing is a must. Although in our century, foot washing is a must also. Yeah, okay, that's easy. But it was a part of everyday life. It was a very common part of travel. It's just like putting gas in the car for us. It is a part of travel. It is a part of arriving at your destination finished to some degree. When your roads are generally not paved, it becomes the custom to clean your feet before you go in somebody's house. Your feet get dirty, even with sandals on. They get muddy, they get dusty, they get all this debris and stuff would be on them. Especially outside the city, which plays a part in this, because the city has paved roads. Outside of the city, you're dirty. you need your feet washed a little bit more. We talked about Pax Romana, about how the Roman worlds of this time would have had these roads, and the roads would have been much better than in the old days. But they still are carrying on this tradition. When you come to somebody's house, there's a bowl. A servant would be there, or someone to meet you as you arrive, and they would wash your feet for you. That would have been the youngest child.
What's the significance of the towel around his waist? Because when God gives that specific, I mean, he don't give a lot of details, but when he does, I mean, if he went to the trouble to put it around his waist, couldn't he just?
I don't have a good answer for that.
Throw it over
That's a
his
good
shoulder?
answer.
I mean-
No, everything he says is for a specific detail.
Right.
I agree with that. I know, in Ephesians, where you gird yourself up, I don't know if that's connected to this or not, but I mean, the KJV would say he girded himself with it.
Like I don't know.
That's a good question. I think he's taking the role of the servant. That's a good way to look at it. He's dressing as the servant. He has the tunic. He has this wrapped around himself, ready to work. He's ready to do some work. Maybe it's kind of part of that. All these people are Galileans. I think that's important. All of them, besides Jews. They're all from Galilee. They're all country folk. They're all from Rockmart. They're good old boys. Iscariot is south of Jerusalem. It would have been a whole different ball game. His accent would have been far different than theirs. Honestly, he could have spoken another language to some degree. But yeah, that's right. Looks fancy. Anyway, but the rest of them they're all hard-working country boys. They've all entered this rich home with their feet unwashed. He doesn't wash them again. They've entered unwashed. This is a situation of they didn't know they needed it. I like that. It's good enough. They've been walking on the road all day. They haven't been out of the city in like 3 days. They come in. Hey, we're ready. That's the way I see this. It's not. They don't have this mud packed on their feet or anything like that. They just had just a little dust there. That kind of thing.
Were they familiar with that?
With the city?
The foot washing?
Oh yes.
Maybe
Every
they
day,
got
every time they went somewhere,
They did.
if they were going over to Larry's house, when you got there, so Larry would meet you with somebody to clean your feet, like every
How come they
single day.
wouldn't have done that then?
Why did they do it? That's what I was wondering.
Because they were in the city and they considered this, they're clean, so they
Oh,
did
okay.
that. Yeah. It doesn't say when they met the man at the house, he cleaned their feet also. They met the man, they started preparing the meal, and then the meal. It's good. I haven't asked them, but anyway, but this is a situation that we all recognize, and we've heard it all in sermons many times. There's a whole lot more here going on than just washing people's feet. Jesus humbly is doing this act for them. In the beginning there, those first 5 verses, we see there's this setup. The first 3, John explains why Jesus should be served, and then in 4 and 5, Jesus stands up and he serves them. That's what's going on here in these first 5 verses. A first century reader would have thrown the book down. They would have been like, you're going to tell me this guy's God, and then you're going to tell me that he's going to go over here and start washing their feet? These people they're Galileans, they're fishermen, that's ridiculous. So many things like that happen in the book of John that we just completely skip, but Jesus, who is humble, he humbles himself, puts himself as the lowest, and he starts serving them. He makes himself the lowest of them, and that's how he operates in this upside down type of world. He shows us that he puts the riffraff first, and he puts himself underneath them. We become first in Matthew 19, but many who are first will be last, and the last first. We're all very familiar with that, and that's exactly what he's doing here. You know, it starts talking about this power that he has in those first 3 verses. He has the power, all this power at his disposal, and then this is the way he does it. We expect him to like take on the devil, you know, one-on-one in this big flashy scene, you know. That is not, that's not the way he does it, you know. Instead, he washes the disciples' feet. He dresses himself as a servant, washes the disciples' feet, including the feet of the one who's about to betray him. Yeah, and I think every disciple probably would have reacted the same way Simon Peter did. He was the first one to talk. He's the chief. He's the first one. So, I don't know. They all would have been happy to wash his feet. They couldn't conceive of washing each other's feet. I think is another important thing. This would have been the task for the lowest of the group. When you're designated as the foot washer, you're the lowest of the group. The lowest servant. Peers did not wash each other's feet. If I'm going to Scott's house to meet with Scott, he would not wash my feet. He would have someone lower than him come out. There's only one other person in his house. So, the only instances of equal, I'll be over later. No, just kidding. The only instances of equals washing each other's feet would have been out of great love, and it would have been very rare. So that's not, you know, that would have been very strange to them. I'm going to skip all that part. I like that, but man, it's 9:50. But this is his example for us as Christians. This is his example of Christian conduct. He puts back on his robe. He resumes his place, and he says, "Do you understand this?" He's teaching. You know, you call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for I am. If I had washed your feet, then you should all wash each other's feet. This is the example. None of you are better than anyone else. No Christian should look down on anyone else, is what he's saying in this. We should not think we are better than anyone else. Blessed are you if you do this. Put others above you. And for me, I'm just going to throw this out there. For me, he doesn't technically mean wash their feet. I know that we commonly have foot washing services in Christian churches and things. I don't really think that's what he's talking about. I don't really think he says kind of do this. For me, do this example and treat other people as if they're above you, is what I get out of that. I think that we don't even understand foot washing in our world. It doesn't really mean anything. It's very strange to us. Oh, this guy's going to touch my feet. Very strange, you know? We're going to... Huh?
They
I'm
have.
going to take those socks off.
Don't cut my hair, I ain't washing my face.
We're going to try to knock out this last segment. We're at least going to focus on one part, and I think in order to do it, we're going to have to read through these 11 verses here. So we're going to pick up in 18, and we're going to read through 30. And Jesus says, I'm not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I'm telling you this now before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at the table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So that disciple, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered him, it is he whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it. So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, what you are going to do quickly. Now no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, buy what we need for the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. Now, for us who have already seen this video, we know when he says night, when he's saying he went out and it was night, I mean, it's not, but it's not as well. Just throw that out there. That's a little too deep for myself there, but anyway. So a lot of this passage is very self-explanatory. There's some discussion going on. We've heard it so many times, but there's so much missed in our culture, in our Western eyes, we look at this so wrong. And we don't understand the setup of the room or the layout or the context of this scene. So I've kind of diagrammed it for us a little bit, and that's what we're sitting at here. We're going to be sitting here to chapter 18, so get comfortable. You can't move from your seat. You're already there. No, just kidding. But one of the worst things for me is Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. It's one of the most famous paintings in the world. It's painted in roughly 1500. It is a mural on this wall in Milan, Italy, at this convent, and that's the scene that we see in our heads. We all see, they're all whatever they're doing. It's completely wrong historically of how we're supposed to view this scene. It's completely wrong. What we think of when we think of that scene is that Christy is in the Jesus seat.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we think. Well, we all know that's wrong.
I hate Peter's thing.
But that's the way we look at it. We look at he's the head of the table, he's at the head, he's in the king's seat is what we try to associate it with. What we have to see is a triclinium. We've kind of talked about this table a couple of weeks, and we kind of have it formed here. It's very high off the ground compared to one of that day, but it would have been a very low table. The disciples would have been laying on the ground around it, reclining on thin mats. They'd had pillows around them, cushions, different things. It would have been a very low table. There would be pillows, I already said that, to lean on. Everybody's leaning on their left arm. Tara says, what about left-handed people? They would have had to have adapted. Sorry, Larry. You'd have had to have adapted to the culture. That's the way everybody laid. So as you're laying on your left arm, you're leaning in to the next person to some degree. You're kind of in their space. This is an intimate meal. Left-handed people would have had to learn the correct way. Leaning in.
Well, they're usually in bed by somebody.
No, you got a free hand. You use that free hand to feed yourself, to drink, to do whatever. Welch's grape juice. But their feet, it extends away from the table, so their feet are free out in the area to walk around. The table would have been too low to put your feet underneath it. What Da Vinci draws.
Get up.
Probably. He'd have been explaining like it is a long meal. If there's one thing about the Passover, we're going to continue talking about, it's a long meal. It is not fast food. This is hours long. So they're sitting at this U-shaped table, just like we're sitting at today. Then the table makes it easy for servants to come into the middle and serve everybody at once. I like that. It makes sense. I don't know why we still don't have it, but Jesus would not have sat in the center. He would have sat the second over here on the left. So Tracy is seating in this. That would have been the seat. That would have been the host's seat. Yeah, of course she picked it. The funny thing is when I first came in, Scott wasn't over here yet, and Tracy was there by herself, and I was like, yeah, you're the right seat. But anyway.
So when you're reading this, it's almost like it's going on really fast, but really it's drawn out for
Very,
hours.
very slow. Hours.
And then, general
the whole thing
conversation
is like 5 hours probably. It's the whole evening. Yeah.
This is
So-
drawn out.
So he's sitting in Tracy's seat. That is the host's seat, the head of the seat. The highest honor would have been the seats to his left and right. The left and right of the host would have been the honored guests. They would have sat on each side of him. I'm not going to have enough time to read this, but in Mark 10, James and John when they're coming into this feast, they are arguing about who is going to sit there. They're also arguing about who's going to be on his right and left side, as they get into the kingdom. That's what they're arguing about, though, is this seating of this meal. I think it makes so much more sense to us when we understand the actual context. We know the importance of the seating. Yeah, Luke, really?
Yeah, it's that.
I gotta pick the rest of the
really
seats.
good,
I know. I'm gonna come back over. I am rushing.
Just
We can be
leave
like 5
off
minutes
and you
late.
can start next
We can be
week.
5 minutes late. All right, hold on. Let me try to get it in.
I got a question, so we're gonna be
Go
6
ahead.
minutes late.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was, they're asking here as if they don't know who it is. Didn't we discuss several chapters earlier that
They don't know who it is.
who was going to betray him? But didn't we discuss several chapters?
He
They
tells us
kinda
like
knew
in a little
then?
note. He makes his own little note. Judas Iscariot, comma, the one who will betray him. He knows after it happens. He doesn't know when it happens. As it's happening at this meal, they don't know.
The other disciples.
The other ones, yeah. I'm just going to kind of just wing this. But so Jesus sits second to the end over here on this end. In the second, in the highest, he's the host, and then the honored guests are to his right and left. To his right would have been a prestigious seat. It's his right-hand man. It's the right hand of the host to some degree. To the left is the guest of honor. We know that John himself sits on his right. We know that because in 13:23, one of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at the table at Jesus' side. He's leaning into KJV's Jesus' chest, his bosom. In chapter 21, it says, he had leaned back against him. The one who he had loved had leaned back against him during the supper. So we know that John is on his right-hand side. In the seat of honor next to him would have been Judas. Judas would have been in the main seat over here where Dwight is. And we know this because it would have been the host's starting of the meal to dip the first bite into the drink, into the sop or whatever you want to call it,
Sad.
before anybody else had done it. And so he dips it and he gives it to Judas to start the meal. So Judas sitting over here is in that seat. The last seat of importance, though, is of course Tara sat over here. But this would have been where Simon Peter sat, and this would have been the lowest seat. As it goes around, it would have been order of importance, and this is where Simon Peter was sitting. So when Jesus rises and he gets up and he comes around, he comes to Simon Peter first. We know about the context, but we would also know it through the different ways of importance to some degree. He is the chief disciple. He's the head. He's the speaker, but Jesus puts him last. It's very good stuff going on here. So I'm not going to have enough time to get into anything else, but we will have in our heads the way they're sitting and their relationship to it. One other part I like to throw out there is Simon, who can't hear what's going over here on this side. He motions to John, and he says, which one of us is it? He signals to him as the ESV. John asks, and he says, I'm going to show you by this, and he doesn't. But nobody else knows what he's talking about because they can't hear. There's 13 people in there talking. So if there's one thing I want to say about this scene, it's that Jesus continually does unexpected things in showing that he loves Judas to the end. He puts him in the seat of honor. Exactly what we would expect from Jesus, in my opinion. So we will get into all that more next week. I had to rush through many of those good details, but I was so excited I had to just get them out. It's pretty exciting. Yeah, no, it's good. Right? Yeah. Whew. All right. So.
I love all the details.
Yes. Yeah, it's good. Hopefully we have a visual of the setup
So
now.
when he was on his left side, who was he looking at? He was looking away from everybody, wasn't
Yeah.
John, you're saying?
he? Yeah, the first one at the table. 'Cause
Yeah.
he was on
He's
his
looking
left
across
side,
at Simon Peter.
but he couldn't see back behind him though.
No,
Yeah.
not really.
Not behind you, but you could look.
Yeah, but he was, if he's on his left side, he had to
neck would be
be. He's definitely looking around like this.
Yeah.
His neck will be so
Another thing that we don't understand is the intimacy of men beside each other as brothers, and they're leaning against each other to some degree. When we see this, the way we see John is he's very young. He's a teenager even to some degree. He's always drawn as the youngest. He's leaning against Jesus. So what we don't realize is that they're all leaning against each other to some degree, and I think that's important. And I'll even say this. I challenged Mark on this earlier this week. Why are they not all teenagers? Why are all of the disciples the same age as Jesus? Why do we see them like that? Why are they not? I mean, they're students. They are. Why are they not all disciples? It's a good question. All right, so you guys think on that one. Any closing questions or angry outbursts or anything?
One thing, I like to think of if we were to go to England to see the Queen of England, and she were to serve us herself,
Good.
or
Or wash our feet.
wash our feet.
Yes.
But
You can
I
take
mean,
our coat off.
we would eat there, but because we don't really wash each other's feet now, we would be like, whoa, the Queen is
Absolutely.
washing serving me a meal herself. It'd be kind of that same whoa.
I agree with that. Another thing that we have in the United States is everybody's equal. So we
Oh,
don't really
yeah.
understand royalty or hierarchy like they used to. For you to speak to the Pharaoh could have meant death.
Oh.
Why are you even talking to him? You know, you're far underneath him. That would have been the order of things in those days, you know. For you to speak to, let's just say Pontius Pilate, as just a normal Jew walking down the street, could have been killed. I mean, for sure. You're far underneath him as far as like the class system and all those kind of things go. Your status would have been so much lower. We don't even understand that, you know.
And then to think of slowing down to this degree, even like if you travel to Europe, I mean, it's very, for American people to have a meal in Europe, it's so slow paced.
100%. That's exactly.
And
It's
then
very
to
different.
think of this magnitude,
Mhm.
this slow a meal, it drives us crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it really would.
We are microwave brained.
There you go.
Our
There you go.
brains are but this, that. It's crazy. You know, one thing I was talking about just the other day
It's hard fast.
is they experienced less in a day, but they took it in.
Exactly.
One thing that I like to look at in those days is just the memorization of songs. They would sing all these songs together. We can't remember the name of the songs that we sing in the worship every single week, you know? They can remember these things because they took in less information to some degree. The information they took in meant more to them. I think that's a very important thing.
I guess I went to an Indian wedding one time, and an Indian wedding is hours.
Mhm.
They feed the groom, they feed the bride, and I mean, it was like from 11 o'clock till 8 o'clock at night. It was
Even
more.
more-
They had
even
two
more-
meals. It was crazy.
Even more exaggerated than that, when we talked about the wedding in Cana, it was 7 days long.
Wow.
Yes. Hey, aren't you guys married already? You know, but anyway, I got to go. I got stuff to do. There was no stuff to do back then. You know, it was much different.
2 hours cost me enough.
Tracy had a coworker where after their wedding, they actually watched.
The wash feet.
No, wash and feet. People look
For
at that like
symbol.
that's a thing.
I never heard of
They're-
it.
No, it's a thing.
It's a symbol, it's very beautiful, it's saying I'm gonna honor you, put you first.
It is.
In a
It is.
wedding, it's a beautiful,
That's nice.
I've seen it, but we don't.
As long as the
like-
wife does it.
Oh,
It's
man.
not both sides. Anyway, moving on. All right. We're going to say a special prayer for that one. Make sure I make it home today. Anyway, all right. We're going to have a quick prayer before we go out to the service. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for opening your word to us this morning. Help us to use these words, apply it to our hearts. Help us to continue in our study, to grow closer to you as you continue to reveal yourself to us. Watch over our service this morning and use it for your glory. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Burn my mouth off. Yeah, it's freezing cold.
Stuck my finger.
Watson, I'm like, hold the door open. He lets go.
Was it hot?